Take just one moment.
Looks like we are good now.
Perfect.
I have to
Excellent.
come over and learn how to do that. That looks like a really good idea. I'll have to learn how to do that.
What we need to do is figure out how to monetize these videos so that we can return some savings to the taxpayers.
Well, we'd have to have a little more sex and violence, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we are ready to go, Madam Chair, and I will leave it to
Okay,
you.
thank you. Lynn, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Margot,
Yes.
Tom Pukish,
He said
Andre?
he had to call in.
Oh, Tom's calling in?
He said it's
Okay, let me know if he shows up.
Okay.
Andre? Scavelli,
Here.
Ansel,
Here.
Brenneman,
here.
Beitendijk, Dutton,
Here.
Berlinski,
Here.
Montgomery,
Here.
Reynolds, Sharon, Starlin,
Here.
Steiner,
Here.
Tufts,
Here.
and Troyer. And then Jonathan.
Here.
Doherty is here. He'd walked away, Lynn. I don't know if you.
I got Andre.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, thank you, Lynn, very much. In your packages, you have a series of minutes for meetings that we have done, one in person, several virtually. I hope you've had a chance to review them, and we can entertain the amendments as required. Were there any adjustments or amendments to the minutes of February 27th?
Move to approve.
Second,
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, same sign. Let's move down to the minutes of April 16th, 2020. This was a Zoom meeting. Were there any additions or corrections, questions?
Move their approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please signify aye.
Aye.
Then we go to May 4th. This was the meeting on the downtown condominium construction. Were there questions on those? Corrections?
Move to approve.
Was that a motion, Joel?
Was.
Okay. Okay. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then the next item is the May 28th Zoom meeting.
Move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we're caught up with your minutes. Lynn, you can put those puppies to bed.
Thank goodness.
Yes. Andre, would you discuss the financial report, please?
all right. Jonathan, did you send all the financials out with the packet?
Yes, we did. On page 15, you will see the one for May, and then just for records, we have the ones for April and March and February as well. And
Perfect. All right,
just like to also note that Mr. Tom Pukish is joining us via phone right now.
Yes, I am. I apologize. I had a computer problem, so I'll be joining you via phone. Thank you.
All right, Margot, I'll just go over May if that's okay.
Okay, certainly.
If it's more current. Whoa. As you see, for May, we had a very good month on our P&L statement. One of the big items on there is the $650,000 sale of the former Horn site. There's also other related expenses to that underneath where it says other economic development activities. So those are were from the closing statement, the costs associated there too. So again, we had a great month of May. We had a net change of cash of positive $612,000. From a year-to-date perspective, it was also obviously pretty fantastic, considering we had $915,000 worth of asset sales. Those would be, we sold the Long Road, 2759 Long Road for $225,000. We sold the Marlboro Trailer Park for $40,000, and the Horn Site, as I said, for $650,000. So that brought us through May $990,000, and we had spent just over $190,000 for a positive change in net cash for $800,000. Add that to what we had on hand at 1/1. That gave us cash at the end of May of just under $1,250,000, and we do have some money set aside for our escrow at Farmers Bank, the Tech Board deal, and then we have $80,000 set aside for permit and rail fees for Gojo. So we have that restricted. Leaves us with just under $1 million, about $988,000 available cash. The only thing I would update on this is that in the month of June, I did write a check to the Wayne County CIC
Oh, good.
for their sales proceeds for the Long Road property, and I also gave the city of Worcester $200,000 proceeds from the sale of Long Road. We had voted out to give the city that. So at the end of June, you'll see that our cash will have gone down probably to about $890,000 or so, and the available cash will be about $630,000 or so. So with that said, I would also say, with respect to the Horn property, once it was all tallied up, we spent $642,666.26, which we actually had a net profit of $7,333.74. That went 60-40, 60 to Wooster Growth, 40% to Wayne County CIC. So actually, Wooster Growth actually made about $4,400 on the deal, and Wayne County Community Improvement Corporation made about $2,333 on the deal. So
That's a very nice record for our first collaboration, wasn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. So
Yeah.
that is all for that. Other than, I believe you should have all received a copy of our audit report for the year ended 12/31/2019. It was a clean audit, and that's all I have. I was willing to entertain any questions anyone has at this time.
Are there any questions? If not, I'd accept a motion to approve the financial report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And now, has everyone received a full copy of the audit report, Andre? Was it?
I think so. I emailed it out to anyone not. I heard back from a couple of members.
Okay. Because I would entertain a motion to approve, to accept the audit report and approve it for filing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for hard work for a clean audit. Always likes those clean audits. Okay. All right. Next, Jonathan.
Jonathan, you're muted.
You have an enterprise zone requirement request?
So we have CRA requirements and evaluation. Do we want to move that to the end?
Oh, did you change your, I did not see the change in the agenda.
So
Let's go through your enterprise zone with our guests, and then we can always get to that part. They may not be as interested.
Okay, sounds great. Well, that being the case, we will start here. I will going to share my screen here. Just to start off, we can our first guest this evening. We have Mr. Keith Erickson, and I believe Timothy Krupp. Tim, if he's not here, he will hopefully be joining us here in just a little bit. But this is an enterprise zone request for a project out along 2730 Akron Road. This is a warehouse project that is being proposed to support a local employer, Krupp Moving and Storage LLC, with the ability to retain their 18 full-time staff in Worcester. This is a company that operates throughout the greater northeastern Ohio region, primarily serving Akron and Canton areas. And the company would like to stay in Worcester. And Mr. Keith Erickson, who's the proprietor of Rawhide Fire Hose and Reed Record Management, also operates KV Management, which is a real estate development and management firm. And together, these two companies have a plan to establish space that will be able to house Krupp Moving and Storage for at least 5 years, hopefully 10, and hopefully a lot longer than that. This particular project, as we go through the report, you can see it involves a 25,000 square foot space within a 55,000 square foot warehouse to be constructed. The company is seeking both companies are seeking a 75% 2.5-year real estate tax abatement on that 25,000 square feet. Because of economies of scale and the fact that KV Management LLC is involved with other businesses, including Rawhide Fire Hose and Reed Record Management, it makes the most sense for the company to move forward with an additional 30,000 square feet of space that will not be abated. So that's going to be part of the project, but it's not abated, and it's something that's in addition. And what this does is it not only provides flexibility for Krupp Moving and Storage in the future, should they need additional space, it will help companies like Rawhide Fire Hose, which is also a primary employer, and also KV Management, again, with Reed Warehouse, may have some benefits from this as well. So there's a lot of companies that can receive a benefit from this, particularly primary employers. And the really amazing thing about Krupp Moving and Storage is the fact that they are is how they have been growing, particularly as they've expanded their level of service offerings. Even though they're based here in the city of Worcester and primarily serve the greater northeastern Ohio area, they actually serve nationwide destinations, and that's a very nice thing for a community to be able to have that type of operation based here. So based on that, and then taking a look at the metrics, we do see that this project currently exists on a site that is valued at $750,000 approximately, with an annual tax obligation of about $20,000. On the maximum end of things, assuming a dollar for dollar translates into a dollar valuation, the post value of the project could be expected to be between $3 and $3.2 million, which is pretty standard in the industry considering the price per square foot on new industrial space. With an annual tax obligation of 75% on the 25,000 square feet, this project will go from producing $20,000 in tax revenue for citizens to $22,000 to $24,000. I'm sorry, to $63,000 to $66,000 per year. It does save the applicants between $22,000 and $24,000 annually, and again, that's for 2.5 years for a total savings of about $55,000 to $60,000. But over that same period, over the abatement period, this project will again be netting between 43 and 46 per year. The warehouse portion of the project, as we mentioned, there's some speculative space involved, and this was a project that KV Management LLC has been working with for well over a year. They approached our office over a year ago, looking for assistance to be able to move forward with this project. They have not been able to. Our programming does not usually allow for the community to incentivize speculative space, and there are several reasons for that. But an opportunity developed with Krupp Moving and Storage needing additional space, and the quality and height of the structure that KV Management LLC had planned out is a perfect fit to help solve that need. So now there's an opportunity to move forward on a project that has been aspirational for quite some time into something real that's going to produce a very high return on investment for our taxpayers in terms of being able to keep an employer in town, and at the same time also generate additional real estate tax, which takes the burden off of homeowners and other businesses. All that being the case, for instance, if this project should be delayed even 16 months, that would be a loss in revenue that would be greater than what the applicants are asking with this abatement.
I move for approval of the abatement.
Okay. So that being said, and just going to some conversation we hope to have later, I'm hoping at this point to open up the conversation. It would be very helpful just so that we can share information to council if each member could just weigh in with any thoughts and comments. How do you feel about this? Why? And what information is important for council to consider with the recommendation that Wooster Growth will give today?
I've got a question or a comment. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So some clarity on the 75% for 2.5 years. We've done a number of enterprise zones for the years that they've always been a 75% 10 years. And so why are we at 2.5 years? That seems a little, it's unique.
It's a little unique for us when we do have abatement, both CRA and and enterprise zone. The abatements are for 2 years of commitment for every 1 year of abatement. In this case, the applicants with Crep Moving and Storage, they have a 5-year lease. So they are committed for certain for being here for 5 years. Now they do hope to remain for an additional 5 years beyond that through an option, but that's not committed at this point. So with 5 years, divide by 2, we get to 2.5. And it's a little unusual that we are at that half-year point. But that being the case, that ensures that the project can move forward and provide the applicants the protection that the abatement will be able to run its course.
So in future enterprise zone applications, we are going to seek double the committed lease term for the abatement?
Mr. Starlin, we already do, and we do that with all of our projects. So everything that has received a 10-year abatement has been subject to a 20-year clawback period. So
but that's different. There's a clawback period. So is HIDEC, which is a great project?
Absolutely.
Is that a 20-year lease?
It's a 20-year commitment.
Well, okay. So, but we did not give KV management the opportunity to commit to 20 years. We're merely going off a lease arrangement.
We would need Crep Moving and Storage and KV management together to agree to a 20-year term to stay at that building to move forward. So at this time, it's a 5-year commitment. We do have Mr. Erickson here who can speak to that more.
Hello, everybody hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Jonathan is correct. We've kind of had this project floundering along, and Mr. Krupp contacted me. He's got some spaces leased in several places, and they're up in April. And he's got an opportunity to do some work for the military, some storage of pods or vaults of household goods for military personnel being transferred both domestically and abroad. And the military puts down some specific requirements on the building height, sprinkler system security, as you may imagine. And when he approached me, we went down the list and pretty much met all that. In fact, anything he needed extra wasn't really for the military. It was block heater, outlet boxes for block heaters to plug his trucks in, an extra garage door, some office space, things like that. And so that's what kind of brought this to fruition. I came to Jonathan, and we're kind of under a little time compression. Not that it's anybody else's problem or fault. It just kind of, it's the dynamic of it. It just kind of happened this way. And Tim has looked at some Baker's buildings that aren't high enough and don't meet some of the other requirements as far as sprinklers, fire suppression, security, those types of things. And Mr. Krupp's also looked outside of town, nearby, but outside of Worcester. And as Jonathan said, he's got 18 to 25 employees. It's a little seasonal because of the moving He's got the furniture company, and he anticipates 5 to 10 new jobs over the next 5 years. So it's a nice little company to keep right here in town. And as Jonathan said, it's only for 25,000 of the 55,000 square feet that I'm building, because I got a commitment for that. Sorry about talking too fast. Anybody got anything for me? Sorry.
I personally think it's a taking an agreement and molding it to what Mr. Erickson needs, and that's why it's a 2.5 year commitment that is doubled for the clawback provision up to 5 years. So that's what he was in need of, and so it got tapered and tailored specifically for that. So I think we're trying to be responsive.
Yep. Anybody else? Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Keith. We appreciate you bringing this forward.
Anybody, anything else for me?
How many jobs are added?
Right now, he's got 18. He's building up to 25, which he typically does anyway, because he's a moving company. They get busy in the summer. But if this military thing goes through like he thinks it's going to, it could be 5 to 10 more employees in the next 5 years. There's not a lot of people that have the space available that meets the military requirements. And the moving part of it is pretty competitive. And it's not really profitable, but he's got a good opportunity to get in on some of the storage. So good question. It could conservatively 5 to 10 people over the next 5 years added to the 18 he's got now.
And Keith, if I could add, with KV Management LLC, in particular, Reed Record Management, you have an extensive background with security and space. So there are some really unique things that go into this that your company's uniquely specialized, qualified to do.
Yeah, that's true. And there's some other commerce that hasn't committed, that has expressed interest in the other 30,000 square feet. Some local, some out of town that would like to have a local presence. Some contractors doing some work for some of the companies we have here in town now. So again, I don't have anything inked yet, but we feel pretty confident that with this head start with Krupp moving in and a little bit of relief on the abatement for a couple of years, that'll give us a good running start at it. And I think it's going to be a great project. Thank you.
Keith, I guess I need to ask a question because I know council specifically asked this at the last abatement. This extra space that you are building and asking for the abatement, would it not happen unless you do get an abatement to help close the gap between the financing and the building out? Is it a necessity, I guess?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Bob. Thank you. Absolutely it is. This project will not get off the ground unless we get this abatement. Correct.
Okay. What's the delta, Mr. Erickson? What's the gap you have right now?
The gap? I'm not sure I understand the question.
In financing.
I still don't understand.
What gap are you trying to close financially?
I still don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't understand what the question
is. Like, how much money difference does it make between how much short are you right now that you couldn't do the project without this? How much money do you need to make it go forward?
Almost all the taxes, the extra additional taxes by virtue of the additional value of the building. With one tenant in there, and I'm assuming that's all I'm going to have to go into this, it can't fly. It won't cash flow.
I think the other thing too is this, obviously, I mean, we have, as a signatory to the agreement, Krupp Moving and Storage is another party to the agreement, also subject to real estate clawbacks. And again, that's how our enterprise zone operates in cases where you have a landlord situation and a tenant situation. Both are signatories in the area that's receiving the abatement. So I imagine this also in their analysis, and again, being that they serve communities well beyond Worcester, we understand that they had been exploring space outside of Wayne County. So part of this, I understand, Mr. Erickson, goes to also impacting their rate in terms of the rate that they, that they would be able to secure for the facility, and having to weigh that with the option of relocating to, or not necessarily relocating, but expanding their operations to Canton, which is more in the center of the region that they serve. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yes. And so for the lease that Mr. Krupp and I have that's being reviewed right now, there's a 5-year initial term, then there's 5-year options after that have percentage of escalation in it. So with a 2.5-year kind of head start, even if no one moves into this building, that'll give me enough savings to cover all the expenses, the mortgage obligation, the taxes for this next 2.5 years. After that, it should be okay with the escalation in the rental rate, provided the loan term doesn't jump after that 5 years. And with things going on now, I don't anticipate that. But the short answer is no. This project will not get off the ground without this.
And again, I understand, we originally were looking at pretty much the same concept from an infrastructure standpoint well over a year ago at this point. So it seems like that it's really a matter of finding the right situation to move forward. And at this point, with having Krupp Moving and Storage being a partner to it, that creates a window of opportunity here that I understand is the impetus for the application.
Right.
And just, this could be a difference in philosophy, but I think when we start asking people about leases and renewals and what gap they need to cover on a project, when it comes to Wooster Growth, I'm not sure, and it could be, again, just a difference in philosophy. But we have ordinances that kind of outline, and it's pretty clear as to what the requirements are, what individuals need to do to secure an investment. And I'm not sure that it's very prudent for us to be asking questions on leases and renewals and who's getting what. That can be loose talk in a public forum.
Well, I think the issue there, Justin, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, but I think the real issue there is Wooster Growth at this point, and then eventually the city is trying to make sure that the business is going to stay there if they invest.
Well, and I can understand that, John, and I can appreciate that, but we have mechanisms in place to assure that happens. The enterprise zone, the CRA, have a tax incentive review council that review these projects annually. And so if Mr. Erickson or HIDEC or anybody else is not adhering to the requirements of the program, then there's an opportunity for a body and city council to terminate those at any time. And I think that's the avenue of which, and again, maybe a difference of philosophy, but I think that's the avenue that we should do as far as reviewing these on an annual basis, instead of getting into who's doing what the lease is, and what the shortfalls are to make the project move forward.
Well, and as far as philosophy goes, we'll have an opportunity to discuss that here just a little bit ahead. But these questions, and Keith, I really appreciate your time and sharing all of this information with us. With what Keith has shared with us today, these details are very important to helping Wooster Growth to be able to help negotiate these projects as council asks us to show that whether or not a project would have a beneficial impact on the community's economy. And I'm very confident with and I'm just the project manager here, but with all the information that Keith has shared and that Mr. Tim Krupp has shared earlier, and he shares in his application, I am very confident as a staff member here to suggest that the request before us would indeed have a very strong beneficial impact on our community. And at the end of the day, in relation to the jobs impact that this project will have and the fiscal impact it will have for the taxpayer, the enterprise zone incentives requested are modest. And therefore, from a staff perspective, I would absolutely recommend this to to the board. So that's where the staff side of it is. So I thank you, Keith, for that info.
Jonathan, may I make a comment?
Please, Mr. Ansel.
Yes, I reiterate Justin's concern regarding these type of investments and meeting criteria for enterprise zone. And this is certainly a very, very reasonable request compared to some of the ones that we've done in the past. We have an entrepreneur who has identified a need with a local company who wants to retain them locally. The 2.5 years, 30 months is the shortest abatement since I've been on council for 15 years. And we've never really mandated to the investors that the lease mirrors the length of the enterprise zone or CRA. So this is a first in the 15 years, and there may have been some of those prior, but this is a net major gain in terms of over the current tax levels of the property. It's a bold move on Mr. Erickson's behalf, because really from a financial perspective, everyone, when you do the math for that 30-month period on the 55,000 square feet, Mr. Erickson's cost will go down 3.37 cents a square foot. Now, we sell square feet in my business, and believe me, that's not even a 10% delta over the low market value of space. So he's going to receive a very short term, a very timeline window for this $2.3 to $2.5 million investment to backfill the other 30,000 square feet. And there is a need for 30,000, but generally users of warehouse space want larger footprints than 30,000. So it's a unique window. That 30,000 is probably going to fit less than 15 to 20% of a consumer demand wanting warehouse space. I don't get many requests for 20 to 30,000 square feet. They want 50 to 75,000 square feet. So again, don't want to rain on future investors nor Mr. Erickson's enthusiasm on a very speculative type of endeavor. Hopefully, and we're confident that Crump will be there longer term and continue to expand, and it's a win-win for all parties involved. But again, caution in terms of trying to micromanage the entrepreneurial spirit of those type of individuals that want to make significant dollar investments within our community. So thank you for allowing me that input. And I feel very, very comfortable with this abatement. And I'm optimistic that when presented to council, if approved through Wooster Growth Corporation, that based on their duration and the financial impact as it is being presented today, will receive favorable endorsements from the majority of council. Thank you.
Are there other questions? If not, are we ready for a motion?
I'll motion to adopt.
Okay.
Or approve.
I'll second it. Brenneman.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion on the floor? Okay, hearing none. All those who are in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for bringing it forward.
Good luck.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Keith.
Okay, onward.
All right. Onward to our next enterprise zone request. And again, a big thank you to Mike and also Scott from HIDAC Technology Corp who are joining us today. This is a project requesting assistance, 75% for 10 years. It is a 20-year commitment from the company. Again, 2 years for every 1 year of abatement. This project seeks to develop a 22,000 square foot warehouse on a parcel that will be split onto a approximately 2.5 acre site. This is just south of the proposed Clear Creek Park that is under development just to the north between where we have Seaman Corporation and then to the south Akron Brass. This particular project is a great opportunity for the city in regard to its impact, and the situation that we're working with here today is Hydac Technology Corp is a manufacturer and engineer and designer firm of industrial fluid components, in particular in our area, valves. The Wooster operation is an 11-person team of industrial specialists, and this group is looking in desperate need to expand as they bring on new product lines to serve what is essentially a national industry here. This company essentially needs to double its space. Presently leases space at 1660 Enterprise Parkway in Worcester. That space is constrained, and there is not the room to add on to that facility practically. And the company essentially needs to double their space. Being a primary employer, this is a firm that has the goal of serving customers nationwide. It is wonderful for the city's portfolio of not just companies, but technologies and availability of practices and diversity of services that can be provided to have a firm that is this engaged in engineering and design and manufacturing of specialized heavy machinery components. There is an opportunity here working with Baker Properties Mount Vernon Limited, which owns the site that you see on the screen, to develop a 22,000 square foot warehouse that will house the Hydac team and allow them to expand their staff with an additional 3 people in the next 3 years, with the opportunity to grow in the future further beyond that. The company plans to invest between 1.2 and 1.5 in the construction of the facility, and there will be some additional costs with land and some additional costs involved with capital that the company will invest as they bring on new machinery. From the economic impacts of it, the current value of the site, just looking at it as industrial, non-CAUV taxed land, is $12,881. With the investment, we go up to a range of $1.2 to $1.5 million. And that translates into a tax obligation of $34,000 to $43,000 per year. The company and the developer who will own the building through the duration, or at least a portion of the duration, are requesting a 75% 10-year tax exemption through the Enterprise Zone program. That will provide them with a savings of approximately $25,000 to $32,000 per year. Over the life of that enterprise zone, that will amount to $255,000 to almost $320,000 of savings. But during that same period, up to an additional $85,000 to $106,000 in new revenues can be anticipated, and then post abatement, the project would result in a net gain for taxpayers of $34,000 to $42,000. Round up to 43 here. As far as employment goes, we do have, these are very skilled positions, and there is approximately $16,000 of annual revenue from income tax anticipated with the project. I'll just move ahead here, and you see this in your packets, but the project proposed, this is the general site layout for that. the site will contain some office space. Most of it is production space. And what I would just like to point out to you on this map, if you're able to see it on the screen, is the building is designed so that it can be expanded further to the south in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very nice in terms of providing the company with the flexibility it needs to not only accommodate its current needs, but long-term needs. In your packet, you also see a letter from Hydac Technology Corporation here. And Mike is on the call here today to speak to this. What's notable here is, again, this is a 10-year tax abatement. It is a commitment for 20 years. It is presently a 10-year lease. It does have an option for purchase after the first 5 years. This is a company that has been in Worcester for over 11 years so far. They have brought a lot of capabilities just in terms of the technology that they offer to add to the diversity of services that we can provide and capabilities that our community provides. So with all this considered, you do see in the report that staff is recommending approval of the abatement for its high impact with the new investment being able to secure primary sector jobs, positive financial and fiscal impacts. And again, this is one of the things about this is just the long-term possibilities with seeing this company grow. So I see that both Mike and Scott are on the call, so I'd like to invite them to share any comments that they have. If not, I would open it up for conversation, please.
Yeah, and I guess just to give you a little bit of background information. So the owner of our company, Dr. Dieter, actually is the one that purchased, was involved in the purchase of Rexroth from Borg Warner back in 1972. So the Dieter family has been involved in the Worcester community essentially since the 1970s. And this is, his commitment basically to this community and growing forward. He since left Rexroth after the purchase of Rexroth by Bosch and focused on his other company, which is Hydac. So when he decided to get into the mobile valve business, he chose Worcester as the location. So there is a long-term history, history with the Worcester and with the Dieter family, and they want to continue that into the future. So with that, we started here in Worcester. I think the plant, Scott was actually one of the first employees 11 years ago. The company first set the first office up in Kidron. And then shortly thereafter moved to this facility here in Worcester. So we'd like to stay here in Worcester. We've looked pretty extensively for other buildings and even the possibility of what we could do to this one to expand it. We were unsuccessful in all of those attempts, and really our last attempt or measure here to stay in the city of Worcester was to partner with Jerry Baker on a new facility. So that's where has led us to the discussions that we're having today.
Well, everybody's excited to have you and maintaining interest in our community. It's something we care very much about. May I ask, is there anyone else who has a question or a comment, please?
I would just say, Mike, that was a great story and a great connection. I was wondering about the whole engineering team that was out off of the 580, or I'm sorry, 585 Enterprise Parkway area, because I know when Rexroth left, we were excited they were keeping the engineering team and specialist component. So I didn't realize that this is that connection and still trying to move forward in our community. And I think it's great whenever you get a specialized group like what you are offering, wanting to locate and stay in your town. That's to me a really good thing, and deserves the support that we can give you to keep the thing going forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments?
I would move for approval of the abatement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the abatement, please signify by raising hand. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Congratulations and welcome home.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, you are welcome to stay with us for the rest of our meeting, but you do not have to. We're going to get into some more technical discussions here.
We'll probably drop off. Thanks again. Nothing personal, but
Good choice, I think.
all right. Have a nice day, all.
Bye-bye.
All right, you guys too. Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to talk to us a little bit about the our CRA and our process and procedures that we have been using. As we all know, we are a creation of and a servant to council. And the idea behind a growth corporation is that it gathers the information, it can keep proprietary information private. It can go through discussions and analysis that companies would prefer not to have in the public forum, in the newspaper. And we are to do some analysis and digging to see that projects conform to the requirements set forth by council. It was therefore a surprise, at least to me, that in the last forwarding of the proposal, this was dealing with Nagy coming forward, we thought that the project had complied with all of the requirements. Now, let me go back one little bit, and that is to be the first to admit that CRA has never been the easiest extension project that we've done. It's cumbersome in some respects. The CRA was initially designed to take care of our downtown area where we truly needed incentives to have people come rehab and restore older facilities, either principally residential, but also commercial. And so at that original statute, which has been tweaked very, very little by the state over the years, by the way, focuses on encouraging people to come spend money on properties that are being distressed. When when council expanded the CRA district up Route 585, the expansion of the map was made, but the actual ordinance did not change really the requirements or what was to be considered. And what I think we've done this time in the application is to learn that perhaps council has other concerns, believing that for example, but for this incentive, a project would not go forward. Well, we have nothing in the ordinance to help guide us as we review projects for council that deals with that. And I would suggest that's an example of perhaps it's time for us to take a look at what the requirements that we have are and how to tighten this up a little bit, both in our process and procedures. What we do not want to do is to have council make a decision that is perceived as arbitrary or swayed by different kinds of preferences. Council has discretion on all matters, but we want our forms to them to be as clean as possible so they have as much data as they can use in making the decision. So that's what I really wanted us to kind of talk about, clarify a little bit, and then see how we can better clean up our process and procedures so that we don't put us as a city in an awkward position going forward.
I compliment you, Margot, for asking that question. And you're right. Maybe we do need to pull the original documents that we're still running off of and dust them off and see how we need to tweak them to match up to today's conditions a little bit closer than maybe where they are right now. So I think that's a valuable process that we spend some time looking at. And I don't know how people would want to do that. If you want a subcommittee to work on that, or if you want the city team to try to put something together and then bring it back to Wooster Growth and let people review something like that and add suggestions or delete things that they feel aren't important. But we're receptive to however you might want to move forward with something like that.
Well, I think probably a subcommittee working on it would be useful, but I think even more importantly would be to get some direction about areas of what perceived to be directions of confusion or incompletion from our council. And John, you were there. And I think we need to know what questions council's asking that we should have asked that you believe should have been incorporated into a process.
Well, I think we focused on the big one, which, like I said, I honestly think that would have passed had it not been for the statement that they would have done it anyway. And so if we want to make that something that moving forward that we are going to ask, I think that's an easy fix. But really, that was I think what they focused on the most.
And of course,
May I interject?
yes, John Ansel.
Yes, and I reinforce John's comments, and I do want to highlight, though, there was questions regarding the spirit of the CRA. And Margot, that kind of talks to your concern, because the CRA was expanded and created up the 585 corridor because 15 years ago, it was a blighted corridor. You know, there was a partially abandoned former manufacturing facility that we know is Rubbermaid. It went up through there. There wasn't much investment or growth in that area. We had an abandoned Hawkins supermarket strip mall there that was going into deterioration and being, marginally used. We had a lot of empty lots with not a lot of new investment and growth, thus the CRA. So the CRA has had a profound impact on that entire corridor. We now have a vibrant, refurbished Hawkins Plaza. We've had investment and growth up completely through the corridor with the hospice expansion and the Fastenal expansion and the small business that Jerry put in that corridor. So it served its purpose. And that was a very important question that many members of council voiced was, it's not in the spirit. That's not a blighted corridor anymore. It's prime real estate. It was greenfield. And that question, as well as the feedback that this project, as we tried to question Mr. Erickson in a similar fashion, and you heard him with a resounding no, this is not going to proceed without this. As we heard from Weaver Construction and Ray and Associates, they had other options. That did have an impact on certain council members' voting process. So that's my perspective and feedback from an intuitive perspective, and also from the feedback that I've received from other council members. But those were the two issues, and not taking anything away from Wooster Growth's review and recommendation of the project. We did our job, and council appreciated that, but there is a concern on council in terms of negatively impacting school funding, as well as the spirit of the intent of the CRA specifically, not so much EZs. We haven't had a failed EZ with the new council in place, but those were the two issues. And I don't think there's a question on the process other than, do we want to consider removing the corridor through 585 out of the CRA because it is not a blighted and distressed area at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may be something like that. The ordinance moving things up didn't change the core language very much until it came to the point of which items could be expedited. So there may be some looking at that council would want to do, whether it's an ordinance change, whether there's a procedure change. We just want to be sure that things continue to work very smoothly and that we're responsive to council's needs. And if council believes that the time has come to let that part go, you know, I think we have to, of course we follow whatever they want. It strikes me as an issue we have to address now, because there has been discussion about whether when the 5L farm comes in, whether it would be part of a CRA, and it will be greenfield.
So,
And, you know, so we have to grapple with this. Jonathan?
So, and these are all great questions. And as we've operated, when we take a look at our ordinances, the ordinances instruct that all applications that come in shall be negotiated. And a lot of the language that you find in the enterprise zone are very similar to what we have in our community reinvestment area. One of the things that's very unique about the city of Worcester is that we have an enterprise zone. For most communities our size, most have a community reinvestment area only, and there is no enterprise zone. And so the state of Ohio, when we take a look at the statute, it advises that CRA is intended for structures that are otherwise discouraged, particularly as you go further into the statute, structures that are housing related or structures that are job creation related. And when we get into job creation, we get into a question about, well, what is a created job? Is that a primary job, or is that a non-primary job, which is consumer driven and a job that needs to be in a very specific locale because they're there based on that very local population? The two projects that we explored today are primary sector, and that they, or at least for Worcester, they're considered primary sector because they serve regions well beyond the city. It doesn't matter if the city is here or not, or the population of the city is here or not, those companies will continue to operate regardless, because their market is outside. And so all of the building construction, at least for the abated portions, and all of the payrolls are tax dollar or are dollars that come in from outside of the region into our region. So in economic development practice, we consider that primary jobs. So when it comes to how we have been operating, our ordinances, again, have used Wooster Growth as sort of that springboard to evaluate. And the goal has always been to define whether or not a particular project would have a beneficial impact on the city of Worcester. At the same time, we do try to work through the requirements that are both the state requirements, which are the ones that basically pertain to maximum percentage levels, and then the city's requirements, which are the ones that define what types of businesses are eligible, or for both CRA and enterprise zone, that 2 years of abatement, or, 2 years of commitment are required for each year that the abatement's provided. So abatements have been required to always apply to the amount of commitment, not necessarily a lease, but what the applicants are willing to commit to in terms of how many years of employment at that site. So we make those checks, we provide the staff report, we look at the fiscal impacts, and as much as we can, we do try to highlight the strengths economically, and if there are weaknesses, we gently try to point that out. Regardless of what staff advises, an application that is made will always make its way through this body and onto Worcester City Council. Applications are not denied as long as they meet those minimum criteria. It's up for Wooster Growth then to use its discretion to determine whether or not there's a beneficial impact to make a recommendation to council. And then that's one of the tools that council uses. And the state of Ohio gives that discretion to council. And it's very important that they do, because there are a lot of, while a staff member can talk about the fiscal and economic impacts and give you numbers and details, there are a lot of qualitative aspects of community need that go into these decisions, and that needs to be handled at the official, at the level where the elected officials have the ability to help guide that process. And I do say, for anybody who has concerns about the decision that was made, I'd recommend taking a look at the meeting meeting recordings that are online. It was very well done. Every single point was explored and analyzed, and so it was an extremely thoughtful process. And we do try as much as we can to work through that at this level. And so the comments and questions and remarks that people make, this is all very helpful that we can share and package with our recommendations. And so going forward, we have done this in the past periodically, but we do want to make it a point, and we will at this going forward, to include meeting minutes so that council can get the full context of what is behind the recommendations that are provided.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's not a question of there's something being wrong with the vote itself. I mean, we work for council, and the question is whether we provided them all the information they needed to make a clear decision. And it seemed to me that there were questions asked that we should have been reviewing within our own system, so we had an answer on that. We're supposed to save them work, not create more.
Correct.
So, John,
Margo,
Ansel?
Yes, I want to highlight the package prepared by the administration and the recommendation of Wooster Growth. I had a consensus agreement by the finance committee that chaired the legislation. It was unanimous. Councilman Myers, Councilman Sanders, and myself. So we felt very, very comfortable with the recommendations and wanted to proceed. Mr. Sanders recused himself, as we all know, so that took an affirmative vote away from the process. So it's the change of philosophy with the council dynamics that I think in the future it's going to be more challenging to have a 100% approval vote on council on any type of abatements, EZs or CRA. So it's just a change of the climate at this point in time that we have to be cognizant and aware of. But it was a solid package. It was a solid recommendation. Okay. The process worked as it should have. But again, the spirit of intent and then also the need and necessity, those two factors influence the affirmative vote, in my opinion. So it's not broken right now. Now, the CRA area that I had mentioned earlier, that's something that can be further reviewed. But the process is a good process. It's a holistic process, and it works 99.9% of the time. In that particular case, it didn't go as we had recommended that it should go from the Finance Committee or Wooster Growth. It's unfortunate.
Okay. Tom.
Yeah, I mean, just to add some comments, I don't think it's broken either. And if you do go back, as Jonathan or whoever said on that council meeting, it was a very good discussion. There was a lot of great points that were brought up. I do think we should have some type of working group and to really talk about the processes and the procedures as far as going forward, just the whole education. And I think we can touch on that philosophical approach. It was unfortunate how it went down for Mr. Nagy. I was saddened that it just, you know, I just didn't think he deserved that. It was just too much confusion and so forth. I think we need to be prepared better for our stakeholders as they go forward through a process like this. Even with Mr. Erickson, I was almost uncomfortable with some of the questions that were being asked to him because I think this is, as John mentioned, you know, we don't want to micromanage this. And I look at it, sometimes we're overcomplicating a program that is already complicated. And it's getting a little too much. It was almost like there was some gotcha questions. I'm not comfortable with asking somebody what their gap is, because when you look at the but for, there's always, in a sense, going to be a but for. There's got, you know, that gap, sometimes it's not clearly defined, but when somebody's building a building, he's building a 55,000 square foot facility. There's a lot of costs involved. There's going to be a lot of taxes involved. And when he's running his numbers, it's probably going to be a skinny deal. When you lower the taxes, it gives them an opportunity to breathe a little bit, just in case there are any hiccups. So as far as defining that gap, maybe there's not really a true gap, but maybe there's that's going to give him the confidence to go forward, knowing that, you know what, I can make this because I'm going to get a break on my taxes. And once again, I know we did I've never seen a 2.5 year tax abatement before. That's kind of new to me. But when we look at these things, I do think we're maybe micromanaging it a little bit too much. And I like where I came from, and I know it's a different culture, it's a different county and so forth. But we never had the tenant on the hook for it. It was always, the abatement was for the developer, whoever owns the building. And maybe that's something we look at. I've talked to another economic developer. He's been in the business for about 30 plus years, worked up in the Cleveland area. And I just asked him, I was just asking him some questions, and he thought the tenant thing was, he never heard of that either. And also the 2 year, or adding 2 years for every 1 year, you know, maybe that's something we look at too. And maybe we keep it, maybe it's been successful. We don't want to fix something that's not broke, but maybe we need to look at what other communities are doing, make sure we're staying competitive and we're deemed pro-business. And I know we are. And I know this community has always been very pro-business, so that's great growth. But things change, and maybe it's just a time to get a working group together and just kind of look at it a little bit closely and make sure we're doing the right thing as we go forward.
I think that's a good idea. I think it would be helpful, or I would look to you for direction, Mr. Ansel. Mr. Beitendijk is in here today, I guess, to see about if council would want to have participation with that. It would certainly be helpful for us to get, if there's guidance from council about what they want to see, we'd like to know it. If they'd like to be part of a working group.
I think that's a good recommendation, and I will send that message to my co-council members, and we'll work through closely with Wooster Growth and the Wayne Economic Development Council. I think it can be a great collaboration to share thoughts and perspectives, and we can get that teed up in the coming months. It's an important, it'll be an important initiative. I agree.
Well, I think it's always, what we always look for is something that is transparent to the community, to the voters, and is explicable to everybody. Everybody should understand, and businesses should feel always that they're on a fair playing field, that everybody is treated the same. They may get a different result, but they're following the same rules, and there's no arbitrary system, and that will keep Worcester nice and safe going forward. Justin.
Yeah, and I wanted to follow up. I mean, because had some conversation just about the economic development processes. And a lot of times when we get the request, I mean, we're towards the end of a project. And the reason, in my opinion, why we have a CRA and an enterprise zone with well-defined requirements is so that individuals, when they purchase a property, they start proceeding with, Nagy has been working on this for months. So when it gives them the assurance so that when they are ready to make an investment, they understand what programs are available and what the requirements are they have to adhere to secure an investment. John, you're absolutely right when you say, he told the truth. He said that he was going to move forward with it anyhow, which that one stings. But the same instance, when we start to bring subjectivity into the review of projects after they meet the requirement, I don't feel comfortable, and I don't know how the WEDC would feel comfortable in making assurances or making strong, inferences that a project is going to, be passed if it meets the criteria. So this does change the game, in my opinion. So the work session is, I think, is long overdue. Additionally, they did hit on the fact that they were turning it down because what John Ansel had mentioned, Councilman Ansel, that the area was not distressed enough. And the one thing that disappoints me is that I wish we could have slowed things down and expressed to City Council that at the end of February, there was a motion, a suggestion that we extend the CRA into the newly acquired $2 million Wooster Industrial Park. And I guess if you look at that property, that is not a distressed property. So some of my concerns is moving forward, if that's the sentiment of the review, is that we are not going to extend CRA agreements because an area is not distressed enough. I don't know how we extend the CRA into the industrial park.
Yeah.
We desperately need that control, because right now that is controlled by the county's enterprise zone, or would go to them without some kind of agreement. So we've worked really hard. We make a big investment. We need that program in there. And I wish that someone would have spoken up and given them that heads up to say, hey, by the way, our goal, our strategic plan is to extend the CRA in an undistressed area.
I'll just again reiterate what the state written policy is, and I'm happy to provide individuals with links to that. There is state statute, law, and written policy that dictates where CRA boundaries are appropriate. It is absolutely perfectly appropriate at the 5L farm for primary businesses that are not otherwise incentivized at that location. There's not evidence to suggest that housing would be appropriate there. There's not evidence to suggest that local population-driven businesses would be appropriate there. But as we can see, we're number 3 in the entire state for the number of CRA projects. And we are second to New Albany, Ohio, which is, I don't know if they have an inch of blight in their territory, but they have utilized the CRA program very well. However, it has been restricted to projects that are not, projects that are otherwise discouraged from locating there, which is primary industry. Primary industry, again, can relocate anywhere. These are projects that we have funded through, or we have provided support through enterprise zones such as Daisy Brands and Luke and so forth. These are companies that make amazingly substantial commitments in hiring and expansion. And that's something that does require community partnership to help develop. That doesn't rely on existing population. There is some assistance that's necessary there. So the state of Ohio has been very clear on where CRA is appropriate. Everywhere where there's a CRA, though, it may not necessarily be appropriate for every project. Where CRA is going to be limited to those types of projects that are discouraged in those areas. And council further emphasizes that in the legislation that's written that dictates that these agreements are to be negotiated, and advises that the minimum level of assistance necessary is provided. So by asking some of the questions we did today, we validated that these projects met those criteria and that these are projects that are going to provide substantial impact. So that said, I would advise that absolutely every economic development principle advises that it is wise to follow the recommendations that Wooster Growth gave previously, which was to extend the CRA to that area. At the same time, one of the recommendations from Wooster Growth was to reduce the level of incentives in the 2008 585 corridor because it had evolved to become better. What was last recommended by Wooster Growth was an increase in the level of investment before incentives can be considered. So that will be going to Worcester City Council. With what we're talking about now, this can also help augment that and be helpful to that process.
Yes, Joel.
I just be real quick, and we've been talking about, maybe there's a little bit of confusion on maybe some of the processes and things like that, and I think it would be very good for us to get together and talk, just so we all understand what the processes we have been following are, and I get a little concerned, when I hear the term arbitrary thrown around. Definitely discretion, but I think there's a difference between discretion and arbitrariness, and maybe that's something that'd be good for us to discuss. Is there are minimum requirements by law, to submit an application or to receive an abatement. Absolutely. Then there's the discretion then that Wooster Growth typically that was the city council where they evaluate whether is that really, okay, it meets the minimum, but is that the best thing to do? And I think that's where some of the confusion has come through this. And I think it'd be very good for everybody to get together and make sure we're all on the same page, so that we understand that. And maybe that, like you said, maybe that's where a few other, tweaks can be made so that it defines that a little better. And as we think about this, Jonathan sent some documents out for review that I would highly recommend everybody look at. One of them is a step-by-step process that typically happens. So look at that. Is there questions there? Is there something wrong with that? Are there tweaks? Then he also issued a document that says how are projects evaluated. That gets into a little bit of that discretion. And I would highly recommend people look at that, and that be something we talk about, at a subsequent meeting or in a subsequent work session. Because I think that's probably where the crux of some of what we're talking about falls.
I think so too. Well, I appreciate everybody. I think this has been helpful. I think it's positive. We all want the same, I think we all want the same goal. And I think it's an absolutely excellent time to be doing it before we're facing different challenges and more of them. And I think we have an opportunity to bring greater clarity and to make the process simpler and more transparent for everybody. So I would suggest, I guess, John Ansell. John, you've got your mute on.
Good.
In ongoing discussion on the issue of enterprise zone and CRA, what I'll do after our summer recess, because I think it's vitally important to get our new council members engaged in this discussion. We'll have a finance committee meeting inviting all members of council, as well as our members of our team here, et cetera, for an hour and a half prior to council, because I really think some of the newer members would become more educated in the objective part of the equation, as well as the subjective part of the equation. And you can understand some of the internal dynamics on council now that have changed when it comes to making these decisions. Once something is teed up, it checks all the boxes, it looks good, but they need to hear the concerns so they can consider those concerns when casting their vote in the future. The process is sound, but right now the evaluation process on behalf of council doesn't have some of the clarity that might be improved if they have participation in this type of discussion. So we'll get that teed up right after our summer recess. I'll make an announcement. We'll have a future date, and this will be priority one.
Okay, well, and then maybe in that meantime, let's see, Jonathan and I don't know, Justin and Tom, are there some things we can do to kind of analyze what we have with our existing process and so forth? John Scavelli and I have gone through the ordinances. We certainly have those. We could put together a workbook and kind of point to what we have, how we've been doing it, and where we believe things could be tightened up.
Sure.
So, I mean, sometimes everybody on this Zoom, I think, feels like Dr. Fauci. You can say all the wonderful things in the world, but he's used to people not paying attention to their doctors. And at the end of the day, our obligation is to follow these rules. We have to follow what the statute says. We have to be reasonable what we say, because everything we do has a cost to it. And unless we get the benefit that protects us, our schools, we can't just go on the cost part. We have to have the part that comes back into balance. And so I think it'd be a good time to look at that. Did you have something, Dr. Tufts? Yes.
I do. Thank you. Perception is rarely reality, but I think the perception that I have is that we're probably not all philosophically the same. I think the comment was made, we all want the same thing. And I don't know that that's true. So I think the evaluation is imperative. I think that maybe on one hand, philosophically, there should be a CRA citywide. If it meets a certain threshold, it's taxpayer dollars flow. It doesn't matter if you need it or not. It is about being pro-business, and then I think I'd probably selfishly am on a bit of a side that I think we have to be careful that we're not just funding everything. I mean, I know it'll never happen again. An applicant will never say again, no, I won't need this. I'm sure they will be counseled to never make that mistake, but I was offended. I voted for that project, and I would not have voted for that project if the person said, I don't need the dollars. I'm going to do it anyway. I felt like I was a part of it, that I let the taxpayer down on that one. And I think city council did make the right decision. And again, I'm sure that'll never happen again, but I think there is a fine line there. I think Jonathan's right that at times that's what elected officials have to do. They have to wade through that at times. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Steiner, you've been very quiet. Are you thinking?
Rarely. No, I mean, I'm kind of with Michael. Okay. I think the whole but-for concept is a bunch of hooey. All right. I mean, anybody that is approaching this body or anybody should be saying, sure, I need this. Because I don't know that we're going to go through the assessment tools that says yes or no, no or go no, or no go, because we haven't looked at that. But then I think the bigger issue is, okay, particularly in the corridor, is that still an area that we want to actively assist people with development? I mean, those are the two things that I heard loud and clear.
Yeah, there's a big difference. You know, I would still argue that somebody who's willing to come in and do a major rehab on a house on Larwell Street or on South Street deserves whatever it is. That should be an incentive, because that's an investment in a core part of our community that has been allowed to go down. That's different, I believe, than saying we're going to do a new building in a green space. But we have to wrestle with this because we want to be prepared to see how to do it. And maybe it is as I said at the very beginning, CRA is kind of a cumbersome tool to do everything we need. And so we're going to have to tweak some of this, I think, by ordinance, or at least by policies and provisions. So
Agreed. In order to be consistent, I agree.
Yeah. Anything else?
I appreciate everyone's discussion here. I've heard many good thoughts and things that probably do need tweaked. And so I think that especially Mr. Ansel, with your comment about getting council energized and looking at it is definitely a right process. And I think for all of us on Wooster Growth to stand back and look at it, I think it's a good venture for all of us. So thank you.
Mr. Ansel, I would throw out there, I think as you're doing some education there, we've got a Board of Education that could use the same type of education on exactly what these tools are used for and how productive they can be. So please, there's 5 other elected officials there that we can always provide some more in-service and professional development for.
Good, I agree. Thank you, Dr. Tafts.
Just the last comment, if I may, Margot. I didn't say much. The whole tax abatement issue, and I agree with Dr. Tefts and I agree with John. And I've been involved with tax abatement for over the last 30 years. Our company originally, we located here in the city of Worcester. It was actually with the help of the tax abatement. We were the first rural tax abatement in the state of Ohio. And that was because the city fathers at that time really felt that we were a good fit. And we came in, and it definitely says something about a community when you look at the pro-business aspects of it. And I think Worcester's done that over the years. And if I may, John, I'd be happy to be involved with that committee that you're going to put together. And Dr. Tefts, I would be available also to help everyone understand from the business perspective what the tax abatements are all about.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn at this point, unless there's something else for the good of the body. Oh, a motion from Joel. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
All
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye-bye. Happy 4th.